December 1st, 1944. A small, dimly lit office deep within the wartime headquarters of the ALSO's mission, on the outskirts of Strasbourg, recently liberated by Allied forces. Outside, winter rains patter against shattered windows. Inside, heavy drapes keep out the cold. A single flickering gas lamp casts long shadows across the dusty wooden table, strewn with German documents, reports, and chemical formulas. A faint smell of damp paper, gun oil, and the lingering trace of cordite from distant artillery fire hangs in the air. Shells still fall not far beyond the walls. Somewhere close, rifles crack and anti-aircraft guns thump, a grim reminder that the war has not yet ended. At the center of the room sits Samuel Goudsmit, the scientific director of the ALSO's mission. His face is gaunt, eyes tired but focused. Outside, the cold wind moans through broken glass. Inside, silence, except for the occasional scrape of a pen on paper and the distant echo of war. Goudsmit stares down at a stack of German research, papers recently secured from a nearby university lab. Among them are laboratory notes, uranium sample inventories, isotope separation blueprints, all the detritus of what might have been a secret atomic program. He leans forward, reading a passage by the light of the lamp. His assistant catches his eye. Without a word, they both realize what the documents mean. Goudsmit's voice, low, steady, but stunned, breaks the silence. There is no critical mass, no enriched uranium, no chain reaction ever achieved. For a moment, the room is suspended in disbelief. Outside, bombs may still fall. Here, in the flickering lamplight, a far heavier burden begins to lift, the weight of fear that the Nazis might detonate an atomic weapon against Europe. But can they trust these papers? Are they complete? Or have the Germans cleverly hidden their darkest secret? Every file turned, every note cross-checked brings both hope and doubt. Tonight, the leaders of the Allied scientific mission will face a question that has haunted them since the project began. Did they just avert a catastrophe? Or are they about to discover that they've been staring at false reassurances all along? As Goudsmit closes the final report, he exhales slowly. Outside, artillery fire rumbles in the distance, almost as if holding its breath. Inside, the room is still. By 1939, the world of physics had entered a new, perilous frontier. Albert Einstein's letter to President Roosevelt had set in motion the chain of events that would become the Manhattan Project. Across the Atlantic, a growing sense of urgency gripped American scientists. The Nazis were rumored to be pursuing a weapon of unimaginable power, a bomb fueled by the splitting of the atom. The possibility was terrifying. If Hitler succeeded, Europe, perhaps the entire world, could be plunged into irreversible catastrophe. Germany had a head start in nuclear research. Scientists like Werner Heisenberg, Otto Hahn, and Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker were celebrated physicists with access to cutting-edge laboratories. Their theoretical understanding of nuclear fission was advanced. By 1938, Hahn and Strassmann had split the uranium atom, confirming fission experimentally. It was a breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Suddenly, a chain reaction was no longer just theoretical. It was achievable, at least in principle. Yet despite the early promise, the German project suffered from structural weaknesses. Internal divisions fragmented research efforts. Army and civilian scientists often competed for funding and influence. Strategic priorities shifted with the tides of war. Hitler, more captivated by rocketry and conventional weapons, never fully understood or invested in the atomic program. Resources were scarce, transport disrupted, and laboratories were scattered across occupied Europe, increasingly vulnerable to Allied advances. Meanwhile, the Allies had their own race against time. In 1942, the Manhattan Project, under the leadership of General Leslie Groves and scientific director J. Robert Oppenheimer, mobilized an unprecedented concentration of intellect, industry, and secrecy. Hundreds of scientists, engineers and technicians worked in isolated sites like Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, and Hanford. Their goal: to develop a bomb before Germany could. But uncertainty persisted. Reports reached Washington of Heisenberg's lectures in Switzerland, of Nazi interest in uranium, and of uranium hexafluoride experiments. Allied intelligence debated the likelihood of a German atomic bomb. Could the Nazis be closer than anyone suspected? Or were they stumbling in the dark, hampered by inefficiency and ideological blindness? Every report carried weight. Every misstep could mean disaster. By late 1944, the situation had become urgent. Allied forces were advancing across France, capturing cities, laboratories, and research facilities. The ALSO's mission, a combined military and scientific intelligence operation, moved with them, tasked with locating and assessing German nuclear capabilities. Its objective was clear: determine if the Third Reich had a functioning nuclear weapon, and, if not, ensure that the raw materials and scientists could not continue the program elsewhere. It was a race against both time and misinformation. The Germans had destroyed equipment in some locations, moved others, and occasionally misled Allied forces with decoy projects. Reports were fragmentary, often contradictory. Within the ALSO's teams, the tension was palpable. Field officers expected one thing, scientists another. Would they find a functional reactor, stockpiles of enriched uranium, or simply a collection of unfinished experiments? From the perspective of the American scientists, the stakes were existential. The failure to secure this knowledge could mean Allied cities destroyed in a single blinding flash. Their role was both scientific and moral: to prevent catastrophe and, in doing so, to understand the limits of German ambition. Samuel Goudsmit, newly assigned to head the scientific assessments, would face the ultimate test. Each captured report, each laboratory document, was a puzzle piece, but would they complete the picture in time? The war pressed forward. Strasbourg had just fallen. Paris was liberated months before. Yet deep in the heart of Germany, laboratories hummed with uncertain experiments, and scientists quietly wondered if the bombs would ever become reality. Across Europe, American intelligence and military planners braced for the worst, while the scientists of ALSO's quietly prayed for the truth to reveal itself. The stage was set. By early December 1944, Goudsmit and his team had gathered enough evidence to confront the ultimate question: had the Germans truly come close to the atomic threshold, or was the nightmare already over before it began? December 1, 1944. The ALSO's mission office in Strasbourg is tense, every movement deliberate, every rustle of paper amplified in the dim light. Samuel Goudsmit sits at the head of the table, flanked by his scientific aides. Around them, intelligence officers, translators, and a few armed escorts maintain a watchful silence. Outside, winter rain lashes the battered city. The war continues, but within these walls a different battle is unfolding, one of intellect, intuition, and the weight of human history. Goudsmit spreads the documents across the table: reports from laboratories in Hechingen, Hagerloch, and Leipzig, personal notes from German physicists, photographs of experimental reactor sites. His eyes scan the pages, noting the absence of critical mass calculations, the incomplete separation of uranium isotopes, the lack of any evidence of a sustained chain reaction. The room is quiet except for the occasional cough or the scratching of a pen. He finally breaks the silence, voice low but firm. There is no nuclear weapon, no reactor capable of producing one. The Germans never came close. The words hang in the air, heavy with disbelief and relief. An officer leans forward, incredulous. "Are you certain, Dr. Goudsmit? Could there be something we're missing?" Goudsmit shakes his head. "We have cross-checked every laboratory, every inventory, every report. Nothing indicates that a bomb was produced, or even that a sustained chain reaction was achieved. They lacked both material and focus. This is conclusive." A translator reads aloud excerpts from Heisenberg's own notes. One passage, dated 1942, states, "A nuclear chain reaction is theoretically possible, but the necessary quantities of heavy water and enriched uranium remain unattainable." Another German physicist writes, "Our efforts continue, but the current apparatus cannot sustain a self-propagating reaction." The room falls silent as the significance sinks in. A young physicist on the team, voice barely above a whisper, breaks the stillness. "So, Hitler never had the bomb. Not ever." Goudsmit looks at him, eyes reflecting both fatigue and incredulity. "Not now, not then, and likely never." The officers exchange glances. Relief mixes with astonishment. Years of fear, planning, and the shadow of potential apocalypse suddenly lose their immediacy. For the first time, the scientists feel the enormity of their discovery. They had prepared for the worst, but reality was far kinder than expectation. Yet even in this moment of revelation, caution tempers their joy. Goudsmit knows that rumors of hidden facilities or secret stockpiles could still mislead them. He writes in his notes, "Every claim must be verified. Even small quantities of fissile material could change the calculations." Still, the evidence points clearly. The German atomic program failed. Meanwhile, the military officers consider the strategic implications. If the Nazis had no bomb, then Allied priorities can shift, resources redirected from fear of nuclear devastation to conventional operations. Intelligence reports from the front lines, previously filtered through the lens of atomic dread, suddenly take on a different meaning. Commands and orders, once rigidly cautious, now allow more aggressive maneuvers. Goudsmit's aides whisper among themselves, recalling the earlier briefings in Washington. They had been warned repeatedly. Germany was working feverishly to develop the ultimate weapon. Months of intelligence, intercepted communications, and field reconnaissance had fed a constant, anxiety-laden narrative. And yet, here it lies on the table, the unvarnished truth. One officer notes the irony. "All this panic and we were already ahead." Goudsmit allows a faint nod but remains somber. Victory in knowledge does not erase the suffering, the destruction, or the ongoing battles. It merely prevents an additional, unimaginable horror. Outside, rain continues to fall, drumming against the shattered windows. Inside, Goudsmit closes the last file, letting it rest on the table. He leans back in his chair, eyes staring into the flickering light. For the first time in months, he allows himself a deep exhale. The Nazis' atomic ambitions, once a looming shadow over Europe, are revealed as an unrealized threat. But the moment is more than relief. It is clarity. It is the recognition that intelligence, diligence, and meticulous verification, the painstaking work of hundreds of scientists, has averted a terror that could have reshaped history. And yet, in that dim office in Strasbourg, Samuel Goudsmit and his team understand something else. While Germany's bomb never materialized, the knowledge they uncover will forever change the scientific landscape and the future of warfare. The room remains silent for a moment longer. Then, as if to acknowledge the weight of their discovery, one officer quietly murmurs, "The world has dodged a bullet, literally." Goudsmit, expression unreadable, simply nods. "Yes, but now the responsibility lies with us." December 2nd, 1944. Word of the ALSO's mission's findings begins to travel up the Allied command chain. From the dim office in Strasbourg to the offices of General Dwight D. Eisenhower and military planners in London, the revelation spreads like a shockwave tempered by relief. Teletypes click, messengers hurry, and secure lines hum with cautious optimism. At headquarters, Eisenhower receives the first official dispatch from Goudsmit. The message is concise. Germany possesses no functional nuclear weapon, no sustained reactor, and no production of fissile material at the scale necessary to threaten Allied cities. Eisenhower reads the report carefully, considering its strategic implications. A weight lifts from his shoulders. For months, the specter of a Nazi atomic bomb has constrained operations. Air raids calibrated to avoid unknown targets, reserves held back in constant readiness for the unthinkable. Now, planning can proceed unshackled. Across the Atlantic in Washington, the news reaches the War Department and the Manhattan Project Command. Robert Oppenheimer and General Leslie Groves review Goudsmit's findings. Their expressions are a mixture of astonishment and relief. Groves, typically terse, allows himself a rare moment of levity. All this expense, all this effort, and for once it seems we were racing shadows. Oppenheimer, however, remains contemplative. While the immediate threat is gone, the responsibility of wielding the atomic bomb now falls squarely on Allied shoulders. Their triumph is not victory in battle, but control over the very power they have helped unleash. Back in Strasbourg, the ALSO's team receives acknowledgement and commendation for their meticulous work. Orders arrive to consolidate captured equipment, documents, and personnel. Scientists are instructed to catalog every experiment, every laboratory, and every scrap of German research. The objective is dual: prevent any future exploitation of German knowledge and provide the Allies with a comprehensive record of the failed atomic program. Field officers, however, face a more immediate challenge. The troops, who have endured months of anxiety over potential nuclear retaliation, now operate with renewed vigor. Artillery units and armored divisions can advance without the constant fear of nuclear surprise. Intelligence officers adjust threat assessments, downgrading priorities for certain targets that had previously been considered potentially nuclear capable. Yet relief is tempered by caution. Goudsmit and his aides insist that verification continues. The Germans, they know, were capable of deception. Laboratories had been dismantled, documents burned, and experiments hidden. Each site must be inspected thoroughly. Soldiers and scientists travel deeper into Germany, Hechingen, Hagerloch, and beyond, confirming, documenting, and preserving evidence. In each laboratory, the same truth emerges: reactors dismantled, uranium stocks limited, and a lack of technical expertise pervasive. Even as the operational picture brightens, there is recognition of the human cost. In private reports, Goudsmit notes the juxtaposition of discovery and devastation. Hospitals filled with wounded soldiers, bombed-out cities, and displaced civilians. The absence of a German atomic bomb is a cause for relief, but the war itself remains unyielding in its brutality. Publicly, however, the news is controlled. Allied propaganda remains focused on conventional victories and liberation efforts. For security reasons, the revelation that Germany never developed a nuclear weapon is not immediately disclosed. The Allies cannot risk revealing the capabilities of their own atomic program prematurely. Goudsmit's discovery, monumental in its scientific and strategic import, remains a classified triumph, celebrated quietly within the corridors of power rather than on public streets. Meanwhile, within Germany, some scientists begin to grasp the futility of their efforts. Heisenberg and his colleagues, captured and interrogated by ALSO's teams, articulate a mixture of professional frustration and resignation. Their work, once lauded in academic circles, is exposed as incomplete, poorly resourced, and ultimately inconsequential. The intellectual pride of a nation, shattered by military and scientific failure, is laid bare before the very forces they had hoped to elude. In the hours and days following the revelation, the full scope of the immediate response becomes clear. Allied strategies are refined, troops move with renewed confidence, intelligence operations pivot, and the Manhattan Project leadership recalibrates its priorities. The war continues, but the shadow of a Nazi atomic bomb, a specter that had loomed over Europe for years, is finally lifted. And yet, in the quiet of their offices and labs, the scientists of ALSO's understand that relief is only part of the story. Their discovery reshapes the moral and strategic landscape. The Allies now hold unprecedented power, the responsibility of which will define the closing chapters of the war and the dawn of a nuclear era. By early 1945, the ramifications of Goudsmit's discovery begin to crystallize. Historians and military strategists would later recognize this moment as pivotal, not because of a battle fought or a city saved, but because of knowledge gained and the chain reaction it set in motion for the remaining months of World War II. For the Allied High Command, the confirmation that Germany had no atomic bomb fundamentally altered strategic priorities. Resources previously earmarked for precautionary nuclear defenses could now be redirected to conventional offensives. The Ardennes counteroffensive, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge, would proceed without the paralyzing fear that a German atomic strike might obliterate towns and supply lines. Generals could plan more aggressively, commanders could move decisively, and soldiers on the ground could operate with a renewed sense of agency, confident that no sudden, apocalyptic weapon would alter the course of their campaigns. The scientific impact was equally profound. The ALSO's mission's documentation of German nuclear research provided an exhaustive record of failures, missteps, and miscalculations. Physicists like Goudsmit compiled data on reactor design, uranium enrichment, and heavy water production, knowledge that would inform post-war nuclear programs. In a sense, the mission transformed lost opportunity into educational triumph. The failures of the Third Reich became a blueprint for understanding both the power and the limitations of atomic science. For Germany, the revelation known only to the Allies at the time was a moral and intellectual reckoning. The promise of a wonder weapon that could reverse the course of the war had been an illusion, fueled by overconfidence, disorganization, and misjudgment. Heisenberg and his colleagues, interrogated under ALSO's supervision, offered insights tinged with professional regret. Their work, theoretically advanced yet practically incomplete, underscored a crucial truth. Technical genius alone is insufficient without organization, resources, and strategic vision. The legacy of the moment extended beyond immediate military and scientific concerns. Politically, the Allies now possessed knowledge that would shape the early Cold War nuclear landscape. The assurance that Germany had not achieved atomic capability allowed American and British leaders to consolidate control over the world's first operational nuclear weapons, a monopoly that would influence diplomacy, deterrent strategy, and the post-war balance of power. Historians today emphasize the counterfactual significance of Goudsmit's findings. Had the Nazis approached functional nuclear weapons even marginally closer, the trajectory of the war could have shifted dramatically. The timeline of European liberation delayed, the destruction of cities intensified, and the atomic narrative of Hiroshima and Nagasaki fundamentally altered. Instead, the missed bomb became a quiet turning point, invisible in public memory but monumental in consequence. Equally important was the human element. Goudsmit's team, often working in dangerous conditions on the front lines, had carried out meticulous investigation under extreme pressure. Their discovery is a testament to disciplined observation and rigorous verification in the face of uncertainty, qualities as essential to wartime science as courage and tactical acumen were to soldiers in the field. Ultimately, the moment underscores a paradox. History sometimes pivots not on what happens, but on what does not. The absence of a Nazi atomic bomb removed one potential catastrophe from an already devastating war. It allowed the Allies to advance decisively, to claim victories that might otherwise have been impossible, and to enter the post-war era with a profound advantage, one built on knowledge rather than bloodshed, on intelligence rather than force. In this sense, December 1, 1944, remains emblematic of a rare, bittersweet victory, a war prevented, a threat averted, and a reminder of the immense power of informed decision-making. December 1, 1944, is remembered not for a battle fought, nor for a city liberated, but for a revelation that quietly shifted the course of history. In a small, rain-soaked office in Strasbourg, Samuel Goudsmit and his team confirmed a truth that millions had feared. The Nazis had failed to develop an atomic bomb. Relief mixed with reflection, for knowledge of this failure carried as much responsibility as victory itself. This moment illuminates the human dimension of war. It shows that courage and diligence take many forms, not only on the battlefield, but also in laboratories, offices, and intelligence posts. The scientists of Alsos, armed with meticulous reasoning and unwavering determination, averted a catastrophe that might have dwarfed all others. They demonstrated that the careful pursuit of truth can have consequences as profound as any strategic maneuver. Yet the story also reminds us of the fragile line between fear and certainty, between potential catastrophe and its avoidance. The absence of a German atomic bomb allowed the Allies to act decisively, shaping the final months of the war and the post-war order. The responsibility of harnessing atomic power now fell upon the victors, a burden that would define global politics for decades to come. History often remembers battles and treaties, generals and headlines. But December 1, 1944, is a quieter testament that knowledge itself, verified, measured, and understood, can save millions of lives, influence strategy, and determine the course of humanity. In that dimly lit office, among papers, uranium samples, and the flickering lamplight, the world dodged a shadow it never saw fully materialize. It is a reminder that even in the darkest hours, human intellect, careful observation, and the courage to confront uncertainty can illuminate a path through catastrophe.